Oh, this is a fun one. I know for me, for sure, this topic would definitely grab my attention if I'm just scrolling through my phone late at night, which I tend to do for hours on end.
Mhm.
But nonetheless, even though I'm a business owner in the junk removal industry, but these types of videos tend to catch my attention regardless of the industry. How much money can you make doing X, Y, Z? So that's the topic of conversation today for us. Um, and obviously, not going to be making any bold claims about guaranteeing certain revenue targets or whatnot, but we want to kind of set the table for those looking at this industry, considering the industry, some realistic numbers and figures and things that you can and should be aware of before you just jump 2 feet into to junk removal, including expenses, how much it costs to set up and operate and run a company like a junk removal company. So over to you for your general thoughts on how much can one make in junk removal.
How much is one willing to spend? There was an expression when I got involved in the NASCAR world almost 15 years ago. My partner and I at the time were working with a big, GMR Marketing is one of the premier marketing firms, especially in NASCAR, but sports marketing. And we hooked up with this guy, consultant, and very, very polished, former CEO of RC Cola, still a mentor of mine. And I remember the first time we met with him, he said, guys, there's a saying in NASCAR that if you want to make a bunch of money, if you want to make a lot of money in NASCAR, or no, I'm butchering this. I'm going to edit it. Okay. He said, if you want to make a little bit of money in NASCAR, you better start with a lot. And that was absolutely true. And I would say, if you want to make a lot of money in the junk removal space, be prepared to spend a lot of money. And that's really just how it goes. There are very few businesses you're going to start off with very little investment and make a lot of money. Now, it's important to qualify, what does a lot mean to you, Davis? Right? I know you pretty well. A lot to you means the same as it does to me, but there's a lot of people that we interact with that a lot to them means doing. I just talked to someone recently who said, "Yeah, we're killing it, 30,000 a month." And I was like, "Man, that's great." But I remember those days for us. We thought getting to 30,000 a month was a big deal. I mean, it was party time. And of
Hmm.
course, now, if we do 140,000 a month, we think, it's good, but we know we can do a lot better than that. So it really is subjective. It depends on the person. If you wanted to do, for example, $1 million in your first year, let's get crazy. Someone just asked me this 2 days ago. Could I make $1 million in my first year? And they said it half joking. I was like, absolutely. And he was like, what? I was like, dude, of course you can. How much are you willing to spend? He was like, oh, I got you. He's like, on what? Trucks, people, a building, and let's even leave the building out. Like, leave the building out. Let's say you've got some property, put it on your land. I was like, but you still need trucks, you need people, you need to spend your way to the top on Google, and that's number one. So I will stop right there and say the biggest thing that you have to be prepared for if you want to make big money in junk removal, absolutely possible first year, 100%. We know
Hmm.
Andrew Thompson did that his first year, and he's been very transparent about how he did that. He spent, $25,000, $30,000 a month just in Google ads. So if you're willing to spend that kind of money, of course you can do $1 million your first year, and you can sustain that. In fact, you shouldn't just sustain it. You should be growing year over year, month over month. Google ads is the number one, but it's not the only one. So that's on the Google ad side, which again, you and I both know that is going to consume the lion's share of your marketing expense. At least it should. Now, if you happen to be in a business model where you have a ton of recurring business, Kevin up in Wisconsin, as you know, has got a lot of recurring business. He's got some corporate accounts. He doesn't have to spend a ton of money on Google ads, but at the same time, his goal is not $1 million to $2 million a year because he's in a much smaller area. So there's so many variables. How many trucks are you willing to buy? How many do you need? I mean, if you're going to do those kinds of numbers, if we're talking dump trucks, you're going to need probably 5 to 6 dump trucks. If you're using box trucks, which we recommend, you're going to need probably 2 to 3 of those. So again, it's that expense. Now, keep in mind, that's not out of pocket. You would never pay cash if you're smart for those trucks. You would finance those. So you may have the money out of pocket for your down payments and for your tax tag title. But other than that, your biggest outgoing expense on a regular basis is simply Google ads. So the net is if you're willing to spin your way to the top, you can do crazy numbers.
Yeah, I think the net for me is everything has context, and a caveat: everything has context in the world for
Yeah.
those of you that care. Um, but yeah, I'm with you. So what I mean by that is that, if you kind of pan out anybody that starts a junk removal company, I don't have the numbers, but I would guess that 90% of them are your single man operator. I'm looking to make a career transition. I'm just going to start this thing on my own. The other 10% are corporate people, entrepreneurs, private investors. They're going to go and start this junk removal enterprise.
Yeah.
So most of the folks out there are not strapped with cash. The 90% of them, the 90 percenters, are not strapped with cash to say, I've got $500,000 to start and throw at this thing, which, yeah, in that regard, you could start spending 5, 10, 15, 20 grand a month on Google AdWords and start probably immediately ranking at the top and start getting calls and in droves. But most folks are not starting in that regard. And so within the junk removal industry, you have to obviously be good at SEO and on the paid side. That's where the majority of your residential stuff is. But if you're a single operator, you have to get out and unfortunately pound the pavement, if you will. And when I say get out, it means just outbound prospects. So you could do that from your comforts of your home behind a computer, call people. But if you're local, get out and go to these local businesses, real estate offices, storage unit complexes, and talk to people. Make them, let them know that you're there. And obviously, there's some sales strategies around it. So when you talk about how much can you make in junk removal, well, the answer is you can make nothing. You could lose your butt. you could you could spend very minimally and also make even less. Or you could knock it out of the park. What I would like to mention is just kind of the again panning out just the capability of what you can do in this space generally. And in my opinion, I like to compare it to other home service lines of business that you could start. And if you do any sort of research, it's very easy. Just go look up all different types of home service companies, window cleaners, power washing, gutter cleaning, so on, HVAC companies, plumbers, so on and so forth, and start to dig in and ask around, because people will tell you, how much revenue do you do on a single truck in this market doing power washing a month or a year?
Yeah.
And what I would say is that junk removal ranks really, really high compared to those other home service lines of business in terms of the revenue that you can do month over month and year over year. Some folks are jumping for joy in power washing at 200 or 300 grand on a truck in a year.
Yep.
Not a problem at all. Though it's probably very high profit compared to junk removal, where a single truck could produce 400 or 500,000 in a year in revenue. I mean, that's a significant over the $200,000 or $300,000 mark, and then you start stacking on multiple trucks in a single market. So I think the ceiling for junk removal, especially just looking at like a major metro market like a Charlotte or a New York or a Chicago, those are probably ripe for multiple trucks for sure. Somewhere in New York is like, I think we've researched, there's people up there that have 10 to 15 trucks, right? Oh, yeah. But like Chicago, you could probably put 3 or 4 or 5 trucks in that market, and you could generate 1.5 to 2.5 million in revenue. And for a home service business, that is really, really good, especially if you're the only owner of that business. You're not splitting profits with another business owner. You may be working the business a little bit. You're kind of semi-absentee, but you've got your teams in the field that do jobs and all that stuff. Like, that's really good revenue for a single market, again, versus something else like a power washing or gutter cleaning, where the average job ticket is much lower. Really the only home service line of business that I can think of that is higher ticket is HVAC. Right, their jobs outside of the maintenance that they do, their jobs are much higher ticket. Like if I want to replace my condensers, I'm looking at a minimum of 15 to 20 grand for that job.
Yeah.
And same thing with like restoration, right? A restoration job, you had your house flooded, like that's a pretty big expense. But like anything HVAC related is a higher ticket than all the other home service lines. So just my 2 cents around just where junk removal falls kind of in the chain of home services relative to the ceiling it has for the revenue.
I think the advantage we had coming into this was the sales and marketing background in the corporate world on a big scale. So understanding the way that Google, a pay per click, just in general, the way that works was very clear from day one. We knew that if we spent this much, we're probably going to do this much. But I think most of the guys that get into this business, and girls that get in this business that don't have that background, especially in digital marketing, they're probably a little bit scared of, a little bit maybe nervous about the Google ad space, because you've heard so many horror stories of, man, I spent so much money, we barely got any phone calls, barely got any leads. And that can absolutely happen. We have seen that in this space. So we know that's true. But I talked to a junk removal business owner a few days ago up in Baltimore. And he said, I've been telling my son that I've got to get off this truck if we're going to grow. And I said, man, absolutely. I said, well, I'm just out of curiosity. What kind of numbers are you guys doing? And he said, well, it's just me and my son. We've been in business for 4 years and we're doing about 30,000 a month. I was like, well, man, that's great. For just two guys, that's great. He goes, and I could tell his son was sitting there. So I think he put me on speakerphone at one point. He goes, yeah, but you think I need to get off the truck is what you're saying. He goes, tell my son. I was like, you absolutely need to get off that truck if you're going to grow. And I said, it just comes down to your personal goals. Are you okay making whatever you're making? And you're probably making pretty good money. If it's just two people, your margins have to be good. I said, you're probably making pretty good money. He's like, yeah. He goes, but it's capped. To grow, to make more money, I've got to get off this truck. I said, that's exactly right. You need to have multiple trucks, multiple guys. Now, I will tell you, and I think you know this, but as soon as you get off that truck, you're going to take a slight pay cut, because what was all yours, now a portion of that has to go towards this additional employee, probably two additional employees, because you as the owner, you're willing to work like we used to do 7 days a week. I mean, bro, you remember when we first started, we'd get started at 7 a.m. and there were times we didn't get home until 10 o'clock at night. And that was on a regular basis. That's very different than hiring someone. When you hire people, they're not going to be willing to work those kind of hours, which means you were probably working 60 to 80 hours a week. So you really need to hire two people. So you're taking a pretty sizable pay cut, if we're being transparent here, when you first bring those guys on. But here's where the magic happens. Once they are fully trained in, now you get a second truck, and you only need maybe one other employee because they're working normal hours. No one's maniacs working 80 hours a week anymore like you were doing. So now you've got two trucks. Payroll has gone up incrementally now because you've only had to hire that one more person, but now you have two trucks running full time. Now your income can go up again. And now it just rinse and repeat. So I think that's the way you have to look at it. And I always look at this through the lens of, if someone is watching this video and they're thinking about doing this, they've never done it. For you, that's what I'm telling you, is to get involved in this business. Don't be afraid of Google Ads. Understand that it is your number one tool. I don't care what you've heard anywhere else. I am telling you, it is your number one tool for lead generation. If it's done correctly, it is number one by far. Does SEO work great? It can, but I have never seen the data, and I nerd out on this stuff daily. I have never seen the data to show that SEO generates more leads. You may have better conversion rates because people know that it's an ad versus organic content. So you may have someone that has a marketing background or doesn't want to get spammed by clicking on your ads. I think the conversion rates are a little better from SEO, but you're not going to have more volume just from SEO. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, what you were talking about a minute ago is a nice segue into the cost side of things. And so what I would say is that, and to your point about adding trucks, like the business itself, this is the beauty of the business, the industry, is that it can be systematized. It very much so could. So the guy you were talking to, I think he was up in Maryland, who's talking about getting off the truck. Like, yeah, dude, you got to get off the truck. And you're likely going to take a pay cut for a specific period of time until you get 2, 3, 4 trucks running, and everybody knows what they're doing and how to optimize jobs, how to reduce costs, all that stuff. And then you've got a business that really should be able to run on its own, even if you step away for a day or two or a week. That's the beauty of the job. And not every industry is that way. Not every business that you start is that way. But what I would tell somebody when they're looking at these YouTube videos, including this one, that's going to have an intriguing title that's capturing you to go click on this video.
And a great thumbnail.
Revenue is not the right thing to look at. because really any business can generate a lot of revenue if you put enough effort and money into it. What you should be looking at is what is the potential EBITDA? What is the profit generated on that figure? A home service company that generates 500,000 in revenue and has 400,000 in profit, that's pretty good. If you can generate $1 million in revenue, but you only have $100,000 in profit, that's bad. Obviously, I'm stating the obvious here, but I think revenue is the wrong way to look at it. And what we see operators do when they first get a junk removal company off the ground, obviously a boatload of mistakes, just like we made 6 years ago. But one of the main things that they don't do is calculate all of the expenses. You'll see it on Facebook groups all the time in comment sections. Hey, I just landed this $5,000 job. I've got $500 in labor involved. I got $500 in dump fees, and so I'm making $4,000. Yeah. And everybody jumps in like, "Oh, nice job, bro. Go get it." And then there's always this one guy that's like, "What about your insurance and your truck expense and
fuel and dump fees and marketing and employees?" Yeah.
All these other line items that clearly this guy hasn't looked at, or probably doesn't invest in an accounting software to look at his books with a fine-tooth comb. And so that's the other side of the revenue conversation, is what is the cost associated with those numbers. And so you have to look at these and it's taken us a while to figure that out as the owners of Junk Raider. Not that we were oblivious to all of the actual costs that go into a job, but it's tough as a business owner, especially if you're not a numbers guy or you're not analytical and you hate looking at spreadsheets like both of us kind of do. Like, trying to back into like, well, what is your daily break even? Because it's not a retail business. It's not a business where you get 1,000 customers every day coming in and 99% of them are buying, and the average ticket price is $4, and so you're grossing $3,000 a day, and you've got your rent is $2,000 a month, and that never changes, and your utilities are typically $500. Like, it's not a brick and mortar retail business where you can project month over month really just by looking at your numbers of like, this is our daily break even. We've got to generate $3,000 of revenue a day just to break even. Anything beyond that's profit. For junk removal, it's really tough to back into that number because your revenue targets fluctuate so much daily, which also fluctuates your cost because revenue is tied to, or your dump fees, for example, are tied to the revenue. If you do 0 jobs, you've got $0 in dump fees versus 5 jobs. And even 5 jobs could vary based on the next day where you do 5 jobs. You could have $100 in dump fees one day and $1,000 on the next. Your insurance is going to fluctuate because it's very much so a business where when you hire personnel, there's a lot of attrition. Unfortunately, there's turnover. And every time you turn something over, you got to reach out to your insurance company and say, "Hey, Dave is no longer with us, but Steve is. Please add him to the insurance." And they're like, "Oh, great. Your premium just went up $11,000 because Steve's got, 4 points on his driver's license." And you're like, "What?" Yeah. So then the next day you thought your break even was $1,000 and now it's 1,500. And so the business itself is it's so nuanced that when you start it, you don't know those things.
Yeah. Well, those are great points. Yeah, I would say, again, number one is going to be getting a hold of your marketing expense. If you understand going into this thing that you have to pay to get to the top, that's the most important thing in my mind, looking back on 6 years. Number two is going to be your employees in terms of your line items, your cost. Number three is going to be all your vehicles. So your trucks, and if you have equipment like skid steers, trailers, those are your top 3 categories. So I would say, again, I'm going to edit this out. Give me 1 second. Okay, I would say the way you want to look at this if you're thinking about getting into this business is start with, what do you need to make? Not what do you want to make, because we all want to make a lot more than we need. What do you need to make your first year? And if your answer is, I need to make a minimum of $75,000 a year, what does that look like per month, pre-tax? What does that look like? What do you have to make? And then you want to look at the market that you're in. Is your market big enough to support those kind of numbers? If you're in a town with a population of 60,000 people and the county itself only has 100,000 people, that is probably not going to happen your first year. Is it going to happen at all? It could, but that means you've most likely had to diversify. If you're in that small of a market, you're probably having to do other things besides just junk removal, like demolition, excavation, grading, you name it. But if you're in a big enough market and that's what you need to make to provide for your family, you need to back engineer this thing. You've got to reverse engineer it. You've got to say, okay, I'm going to start with this. Here's what I have to make. I want to do then, I need to probably gross $30,000 to $40,000 per month. Okay, how can you do that? Well, we can tell you that if you want to make, if you need to gross $40,000 per month, be prepared to spend probably minimum $4,000 to $5,000 per month in your Google ads. And there's a lot of variables that go into that. So I can just imagine comments right now of no, that's not true, or that's way too much in my market. I don't have to spend anywhere near that. But again, it's a broad stroke, but that's how you could back into these numbers. So do you have the intestinal fortitude, to make that kind of a leap and expect to make that kind of money first year? But B, take your time. Do you have the ability to just sit and take your time and really break this down? Because it's absolutely possible to do those numbers as long as you know what you're doing before you get into it. The biggest mistake you can make is think you're going to make those numbers, go out and buy a truck and a trailer in a smaller market, know nothing about Google ads, and expect you're going to make this big money and provide for your family the way you're used to. That's a big mistake.
Intestinal fortitude. That's amazing.
I could say testicular, but intestinal is a little safer.
It wouldn't come with as much punch. That's good. I'll end it with this because I think this has been good. I would encourage folks not to listen to folks on YouTube or any other channel pushing how much money you can make in junk removal and courses and let me mentor you for a fee. A lot of that is, catchy stuff to draw you in, potentially get you to buy a course. Not that these courses aren't valuable, but take it with a grain of salt. Like, oh, you can make $3 million doing junk. Like, it's all relative. You can make $3 million doing a lot of things. You can make $1 million doing a lot of things. Again, everything we touched on in this episode about knowing where you need to be financially, like to your point, but also just backing into knowing all of your numbers from a cost perspective. That's really what you should be looking at, not the top line. Can I make $1 million? Can I make $3 million? Can I make $1,000 a day? Like, nobody really cares from a business owner perspective if it's not profitable money. And so that's really the point that I would like to make here. And what I, again, would encourage folks to do when they look at the business, look at the industry, they want to potentially start it, you're going to find all sorts of information online. Try to steer clear of falling into this trap that the industry itself is, foolproof and anybody can get into it and make a bunch of revenue. That is true based on context of how much you're willing to spend and all that stuff. But is it profitable money? And so I'll end it with that. Good luck to anybody looking to get into the industry. Of course, we have opportunity available so that you can bypass all those mistakes. But this episode isn't about promoting. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, let me say the last thing. If you're a new junk removal business owner or an old junk removal business owner, maybe you're a seasoned veteran, or maybe you're thinking about getting into this business. If you have any questions about, are you fully optimized with the way you're running your business? If you want to just pick our brains, leave the note in the comment section. We will respond to that. We'd be happy to add value. There's no charge. There's no consultation fee on its way. If we can help you, though, in any way to optimize your business and just get things right before you get in or before you continue making further mistakes, let us know in the comment section below. We'd be happy to help.